In this CDX user tutorial, we're going to take a look at editing assessment content. To do anything with assessments, you need teacher access to your CDX site, so you can log in with your teacher account or log in with your supervisor account and change your role to teacher. I'm going to log in with my supervisor account, navigate to my light vehicle course, and then up in the upper right hand side I'm going to switch my role to CDX teacher. If you logged in directly with your CDX teacher account, you can skip this step. So whenever you're in a test and you're looking to edit the content, you can click the Edit tab. And this is an important message that I want to point out. It says you cannot add or remove questions because there are attempts. Obviously, once there have been attempts made on a quiz, you don't want to edit or change the questions, because then you're going to adversely affect the grade of those who have already taken the quiz. So if you need to add or remove questions for a quiz that has already had an attempt or multiple attempts in it, you will need to delete those attempts first. To do that, if you go back to the Info tab and then click on Attempts, it's showing that there are 3. And then I can click on these 3, I want to select them, and I can click Delete Selected Attempts. If you have a lot of attempts, then you can come down here and use this method. It's a little faster. Click Select All, and then click Delete Selected Attempts. So I'm going to find a quiz that doesn't have any attempts in it, so we can look at adding and removing questions. And I'm in ASC 7 for HVAC in the Basic Principles section, and we're going to take a look at this first topic group quiz. So I open this up, I'm going to click on it as if I was going to attempt it, and then I want to click on the Edit tab. The left side of the screen, the questions in this quiz section, displays all the questions that will show up on student attempts. In most cases, you'll see a lot of random question placeholders, and these random questions draw from the question bank, resulting in a different test for each student. This is really helpful because that keeps things randomized, and if you're working in something like a computer lab, it also helps prevent students from copying from each other. The question bank on the right-hand side of the screen is where you can interact with the content that really drives the assessment. You won't see any questions in the question bank until you change the category. So if you click on the drop-down that says blank, and then select the name of the category for the assessment, and for this it's going to be the default for HVAC Basic Principles, and then the number in parentheses indicates how many questions are contained in the category. So for this category, we actually have 34 questions in the question bank, but currently in the quiz, there are only 10 questions. The benefit to this, again, is randomization. So this is why we have the random question placeholders on the left-hand side. So for this quiz, we're going to have 10 random questions that are all pulled from the question bank, which contains 34 questions. So currently for this quiz, there are 10 questions, but if we wanted to add more questions, there are a couple of ways to do that. The quickest way is to come down to the bottom of the question bank section, and we can select to add a certain number of random questions. So if we want to change the question total from 10 questions to 15, we can select 5 and then click Add. And then over here we've gone from 10 random questions to 15 random questions. And those 15 random questions will all be pulled from the same question bank. Now to remove any number of questions in the quiz, we can click the blue double chevrons, and we can use this button to remove as many of the questions as we want. So if we wanted to reduce this quiz from 10 questions down to 5, we could do that as well. Another useful tool, if you look at the question bank side and check this box to show the question text in the question list, then down here we don't just have a list of the question names, but we actually have the question text. So if there's a specific question you want asked of every student, you don't want it randomly pulled, but you actually want every student to be asked this question, then use the double chevrons over here on a specific question to move that over to the questions in this quiz column. So now a question 1181 will be asked of every student in addition to the 10 random questions that are being pulled from the question bank as well. And then of course if we wanted to limit it to 10 questions, then we can use the double chevrons to eliminate one of the random question placeholders, and now this quiz is back to 10 questions. If you want to review a question, you can use the little magnifying glass. This will open up in a second window. Heat is a form of energy which can be destroyed. It's a true or false question. And we have a couple of options, and one of the most useful, if you're looking to check an answer, click the Fill with Correct, and that will show you what the correct answer is. If for some reason you want to edit a question, you can use this icon here, and this will take you into the question so that you can edit it. Do not edit the question name. It's similar to not editing the assessment or the quiz name. It will disconnect it from the site and then nobody will have access to it. So be sure that you leave the question name and also leave the category the same as well. That way it doesn't get disconnected from your question bank. So here we have the question text. Heat is a form of energy which can be destroyed. And further down we have our choice 1, choice 2, it's a true and false. True is obviously a grade of none, and false is going to be a grade of 100%. We also have the feedback in here, which is saying that since heat is a form of energy, it cannot be destroyed. So when students receive the feedback, we were talking about feedback earlier in the video, if students are looking at that feedback, this is going to be the feedback for each of these choices. So if we needed to change an answer or change a grade, or if we wanted to add more answers, obviously we want to do this for true false, but we would do it for a multiple choice question, then we can add choices and adjust grades as well. So if you make any adjustments, obviously you want to scroll down to the bottom and click Save Changes. I'm going to click Cancel because I don't want to save those changes, and then we're back looking at our assessment content. If you want to create a question of your own and add it to the quiz, that's easy to do. Come here to where it says Create New Question, and then you can choose from any of these options. If you're curious about what the other options are, feel free to click on the question mark, and that will give you a description of each of these options. Typically, in your Moodle site, you're going to see multiple choice and true-false. So if we wanted to create a new multiple choice question, we're going to select that option. This is going to bring us to the Adding Multiple Choice Question page. We can add a question name. You can title this whatever you want. If you're going to be adding more than one, it's a good idea to keep them in a numbered system. That way when you're going through the question banks, if you're ever looking at those, then you can know which questions are yours and which questions are by default in the system. It's also not advisable to use the question text as the question name, because then it's not sorted numerically, which can make finding and editing questions in the quiz bank pretty difficult. So come up with a naming or numbering system for your custom questions. That way it's easier to use later on. So here we can add the question text. And we want to be sure that it's in the same category. By default, if you're doing this inside of an assessment, it's going to put it in the default category for the question bank that you're working on. So in this case, it is default for HVAC Basic Principles quiz, which is exactly where we want it for this assessment. So we can add the question text here, and then we can assign a grade. Default is going to be 1, and then we can provide general feedback. As we saw with your other questions, sometimes it's good to be able to explain a question in the feedback section. So here we also come down, we have our choice 1, choice 2, and so I'm going to add these in. So you can add feedback for each individual choice, or you can add feedback, the same feedback for all of the choices depending on the type of question. If you want to specify why one choice is more important than the others and you want to make that unique for each question, so if you want to explain why choice B is incorrect and why choice A is correct, and then for the feedback for your third choice, why choice C is incorrect as opposed to choice A, you have the option of doing that. This feedback can be whatever you decide you want it to be. Obviously, we want to assign a grade, so under choice A, grade is going to be set to 100%, and the grade for all the other choices should be set to none. That way there's only one choice with a full grade. So once you have all your choices filled out and the grade set appropriately, you can come back up to the top to adjust a couple more settings if you want. One or multiple answers, usually by default it's one answer only. You have the option to add multiple answers allowed for a particular question, but if that's the case, then each choice is actually going to have to be a partial grade. So if you have a multiple choice with 4 answers and 2 of them are correct, then for example choice A and choice B, then choice A and choice B, the grade would both have to be set to 50%. But that also means that if the student answers only one of them, then they're only going to get half credit. So if you're using the multiple answers allowed option, just know that the total grade for all of your choices is going to have to add up to 100% if one answer isn't the correct answer. You can also change the numbering choices, ABC, ABC capitalized, 1, 2, and 3, or no numbering. Shuffle the choices is another good option we have when creating our own questions. By default, this is turned on for multiple choice questions, and we talked a bit about this setting in the Updating Assessment Parameters video, so here's why and how to use this feature. Shuffling the answer choices is useful especially for quizzes with multiple attempts because not only are the quiz questions shuffled, but the answers to those questions are shuffled as well, resulting in a different quiz every time. The second main purpose behind this is to prevent students from copying from each other's screens. As mentioned in the Updating Assessment Parameters video, this option has to be enabled here within the question settings, and it also has to be enabled in the assessment settings for it to work. By default, all of the standard multiple choice questions inside your CDX site have this option turned on, so it's not something you need to worry about it unless you are creating your own questions. A time when you wouldn't want to use the Shuffle the Choices option would be for true-false questions and Tech A-B questions because students typically expect the answers for those questions to be in a particular order to prevent confusion. For those questions, you would want to uncheck the Shuffle the Choices option for each individual question, but leave it on in the quiz settings. That way, when you add your custom question to your quiz, it will shuffle all of the answers for multiple choice questions, but the quiz will not shuffle the true-false and Tech A-B questions. By default, the individual true-false and Tech A-B questions inside your CDX site have been set to not shuffle within questions to prevent confusion for the students. But be aware that if you create your own true-false or Tech A-B questions, you'll need to uncheck the Shuffle the Choices box. That way your true-false or Tech A-B choices inside of your custom questions won't be shuffled. So once we have all of the parameters set for this quiz, all we have to do is scroll down to the bottom of the page and click Save Changes. This takes us back to the question bank, and here we have custom question 1 right up here at the top. Now if you leave custom question 1 here in the question bank, then it can be randomly pulled just like all of the other questions using the random question placeholders in the questions in this quiz list. If you want custom question 1 to be asked of every single student on every test and you want to force this question, then you want to use the double chevrons as we saw earlier to add it to the quiz. Now custom question 1 is in the questions in this quiz list, and it will be asked of every single student who takes the exam. Once you've made all of the changes to the quiz, you want to be sure that you click the Save Changes button under the questions in this quiz section. Otherwise, none of the changes that you made will actually be applied to the quiz. So that's the basics on editing assessment content. We've talked about adding random questions, removing random questions, adding specific questions from the question bank, as well as adding your own custom questions to a particular quiz. As always, if you have any questions about any of this, feel free to contact tech support or your CDX sales representative.